Dr. Ogello is a scholar and research scientist working in the Department of Animal and Fishery Sciences at Maceno University. Dr. Ogello has obtained professional training in sustainable aquaculture development in the Netherlands, aquaculture production and management in Israel, and on streams and river ecology in Sweden. So a very international training. He is also an African food fellow. Dr. Ogello worked previously as a research scientist at the Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute for 10 years, where he also served as the director for Kigadi and Sangoro Aquaculture Research Centers. His research interests include fisheries, science, aquaculture, value chain, and blue economy. Dr. Ogello has published over 70 scholarly articles in peer-reviewed journals and presented talks and papers in many conferences. And finally, Dr. Ogello is a member of the East African Water Association and Aquaculture Association of Kenya. Welcome, Dr. Ogello. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Sherry Weisa. I hope I got the name right. Yeah, thank you so much for the detailed introduction. I'm glad to be here and I'm happy to meet everyone here. I can see some of my current and former students have also signed in. That's really good for me and nice. So thank you so much. I don't know whether I just start to present right away or there's other communication, Sherry.
I think you can get started unless I think Louisa has just joined, unless Louisa had anything she wanted to add before we get started. No, I think you could just get started. And for those of you who are not muted, can you mute yourselves while Dr. Ogello is speaking? Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, Louisa, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Sherry. You're asking me to introduce Dr. Ogello.
Oh, no, I just introduced him, but Dr. Ogello had asked if there was anything else we wanted to announce or say before he gets started.
Oh, okay. Okay. Sorry, I had not connected my microphone.
No.
So, yeah, so I did not hear the preliminary part. But thank you so much for introducing Dr. Erick Ogello, who is my colleague, and I look forward to the presentation. Welcome, Dr. Ogello. Sorry for being late. Yeah, please do mute Ferdinand. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Luis. Once again, thank you, Sherry. I'm happy to be here one more time, and I'm happy to see my former students and current students, colleagues, and fellow researchers. Welcome to this presentation. If you allow me, Sherry, then I will share my slide right away.
Yes, you can go ahead.
Please let me know if you can see my slides.
We
Yes,
see your slides with the notes, so you may want to put it on the presenter view.
Okay, I've just done presentation mode. So is it clear?
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will start my presentation, and this evening in Kenya now, it's evening. For those who are in Kenya, I don't know what time in the US. I'm going to link aquaculture to Planetary Health and Wealth Creation Program. In Kenya, let me start by saying that aquaculture is taking a different trajectory because of the interest that it has attracted. This is because of the nutrition aspect, human health aspect, economic aspect, and the capacity of aquaculture to improve even natural fisheries. So right now, I think we are really prepared to take off in terms of aquaculture production. So this evening, I want to integrate this aquaculture into planetary health And also I will talk about the projects that we are doing currently to ensure sufficient production of fish, sufficient economic ventures, and generally positive livelihoods, especially the vulnerable members of the society. I will talk about planetary health, yes. Then I want to say something about the role of aquaculture in food systems, because that is key to this presentation. Of course, fish as for health and wealth is quite obvious. So again, then I will again narrow it strictly to the climate smart fish culture systems that we are currently undertaking under Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Project. Also talk about one of the projects that we are doing at Coastal Kenya is about Artemia production and link it to human nutrition as well. Then finally, I will talk about blue cycling, which is also another project that is actually upcoming. And this is about converting waste to wealth, black soldier fly as biogas. And finally, I will look at the priorities for future aquaculture production. And this applies not only in Kenya, but also in the rest of the world. So I want to start by introducing aquaculture, and I hope everyone is seeing my slides. There was a time I was making a presentation and I was ahead of everyone. Can you confirm you are seeing my slides?
Yes, we could see your slides.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm introducing aquaculture. This is a farming of aquatic animals, as we all know. And in many cases, we always say it's blue farming because it involves water. And in Kenya, we are doing it in fish ponds, we are doing it in cages, we are doing it in tanks, in aquariums. And of course, there are also other emerging technologies that are being used to spearhead aquaculture. So in terms of planetary health, we of course know that we are living in one Earth, one planet. And talking about public health, that is very fundamental to humanity and also the global health and one health. All these are wrapped up in planetary health. What it means, therefore, is that we have to be mindful of our environmental health, we have to be mindful of our human health, and also the health of animals. And all this is under one health. So then how is aquaculture linked to this topic that is key to the entire world? Aquaculture has been on the spot in terms of polluting environment, things to do with eutrophication, disrupting trophic balances, releasing toxins into the environment, transfer of wild populations. So this has been mapped. And of course, we know even in terms of use of antibiotics for curing fish diseases, anesthetic, some of these chemicals find their ways into the environment. And of course, they can bring significant impacts into the environment. And so it's a concern. So then we are talking about intensification of aquaculture, because I will mention later on that fish consumption has grown so much in the world that it is only aquaculture that can be the savior in terms of provision of sufficient fish for everyone. And therefore that has driven people into intensification. So when we do intensification of systems, then we cannot run away from this kind of issues. But then we are talking about sustainable aquaculture, eco-friendly aquaculture, because then these are the techniques that we can be able to use to obtain sufficient quantities of fish, but at the same time respect the sanctity of the environment in which we stay and in which we live. So yes, elimination of waste, fish ponds eliminate waste, so they can be agents of generating waste, and also they can also be agents of eliminating waste. And that will come back in this presentation when I'm talking about biocircular economy. In terms of recirculating products and materials, yes, it's possible with the eco-friendly aquaculture, so that we be able to regenerate nature. And this is what we call regenerative aquaculture principles, so that we indeed find that we leave the earth better than we started when we are starting aquaculture. So those are the issues now that we want to talk about. And of course, issues of climate change, biodiversity laws, and social needs. These are debates that are currently alive. And we want just to wonder, even if we want to produce fish for everyone, are we going to produce fish at the expense of the environment, at the expense of biodiversity laws? We know about the shrimp production in Southeastern Asia, where they, in Sri Lanka, I think, and parts of Indonesia, where they cleared mangroves to plant shrimps and, plunging the country into serious environmental problems. So yes, indeed, it is true. Principles of eco-friendly aquaculture, we have to remain alive to the fact that we can be able to do our aquaculture at the same time respecting environment. I was saying previously that the appetite for fish is skyrocketing, because right now we will need to increase fish by 46.4 metric tons, and that's by 2030, which is basically 7 years to come. And you can see that world population is going up, global consumption of aquaculture is also going up. And what is amazing is that the consumption of wild fisheries is almost stagnating, is actually on the decline. And this is because of environmental issues that have affected natural waters. So this is a concern. So as the natural waters not being able to produce sufficient fish, aquaculture has found a way and an avenue to produce sufficient quantities. And even in terms of consumption, we are now seeing that by 2030, 62%. Hello? Hello? Is everyone here with me?
Yes, we are. We can hear you, Dr. Ogello.
Okay, thank you. So by 2030, 62% of fish consumed will be from farms, from aquaculture facilities. That is a telling index. And of course, as we speak now of the fish consumption per capita for countries like China, Japan, Indonesia, and I think the US probably is talking about 20.3 kilo per person per year. Look at the shift from 1961 to 2016. So it means people are consuming fish. In Kenya, we are under 5 kilo per person per year, which is really, really not good index to talk about. In the global arena, I think I've mentioned this thinly, we are seeing the wild capture fisheries being on the stagnation mode. And after 2020, it is slowly degenerating, slowly on the snook dive. At the same time, we are seeing aquaculture production going up and up and up. And in the projection by 2050, aquaculture will be producing around 240 or 230 million metric tons. That fish has to be produced. So we have to ask ourselves, what are the technologies? How? And what are the detrimental effects of that production? So how resource efficient is aquaculture? If we do a slight comparison between fish and other livestock, you can see that indeed you require only 1.1 kilo of feeds to produce 1 kilo of fish. So in terms of feed conversion ratio, fish is more efficient compared to pigs, chicken, and cows or dairy. I'm sorry if my friends from the livestock sector is in the meeting, but this is statistics. So it means it is much resource efficient to produce fish. And these are the driving factors for fish production. And of course, even in terms of protein, like now, I think FAO 2021 says fish is the superior protein for human health. Yes, the nature's superfood. And I don't want to say much about this because it's quite obvious. From fish, we have iron, iodine, vitamin, proteins, and zinc. You remember zinc was also very crucial during this pandemic that, the COVID pandemic, of course, still there, but not in a high mode right now. So more than 3.1 billion people depend on fish. So I'm just trying to, indicate that indeed fish consumption is on the high level. It is the nature superfood, and therefore we have to produce it in mass. In Kenya, recently we were on a campaign, Eat More Fish campaign. because there are some communities in Kenya that were not eating fish. So these are government-driven projects to drive people to eat fish, to be healthy and to be wise also. So we have done this kind of publications. We have made it possible in terms of spreading the gospel of eating fish. In terms of economics, yes, mapping the oceanic wealth, Kenya has over 600 kilometers of coastal stretch, and within our exclusive economic zone, the last estimation is that 300 billion Kenya shillings can be extracted annually from under our EEZ. That is a huge amount of money that's just lying in the blue economy sector. So, but just by saying fishery sector is contributing 1% of national GDP, which is also quite significant if you compare with other factors. So indeed, this is where we are, and we need to have more campaign to extract our blue economy potential in our oceans. We did some study recently about diagnosing the blue economy potential. And our finding was that up to 1 million youths can escape poverty trap within the confines of fisheries, aquaculture, and tourism sectors. That is, talking within the purview of blue economy concept. So indeed, we have quite rich resources that can be able to support our livelihoods. And now allow me to bring this debate of food systems into aquaculture, our main drivers for aquaculture production. And this could be true even for other value chains. We have demographics, population going up, urbanization is high, like Kisumu is on another development trajectory now. Consumption is high, technology, markets, climate change, environment, policies, and geopolitics. All these are driving the food production system right from production point, processing, retailing, and towards consuming. And in that scale, we are also generating a lot of waste. Now we estimate 30% of all food produced goes to waste, and we'll come back to that waste disposal and waste production as well. So all this, the outcome is economic and social well-being, yes, food and nutrition security, and environmental sustainability. So we can see that indeed, going back, the loop going back to drivers, environmental sustainability is speaking directly within the purview of planetary health, One Health, because we are talking about natural systems, human systems, and food systems. Now, this is fish production in Kenya. You can see we are not doing very well compared to some countries in the Asian continent. I think roughly we are at around 25,000 metric tons, and that includes tilapia, catfish, common carp, rainbow trout. So indeed, not very pressing there, but then of course we'll discuss some of the issues why, for example, Kenya is not producing a lot yet. Ecologically, we have very interesting climate and the resources that can be able to jumpstart fish farming. Poor quality seeds, some of the persisting challenges, marketing, distribution, expensive taxes, post-harvest losses, really a big problem there. A poor quality seed, I think that's repeated. We are talking about training and sensitization needs. Aquaculture is science, and therefore people need to be trained on the principles and techniques for fish production in a sustainable way, and also following best practice management practices. Climate change, emerging issues like COVID-19 pandemic, that was a big issue. We don't know which pandemic is next, so we have to be prepared. So these are just to diagnose a few major concerns why we are not being able to produce much. But now you are seeing in my slide, this is comparing fish deficit and demand with production. We are basically producing around 140 or 150,000 metric tons annually, and we can see our demand is almost toward 500. That means the deficit is somewhere around 350 going to 400, according to 2016 statistics. Today, the estimation is around 500,000 in terms of deficit. So I think it is quite evident that people are growing in numbers, but there's not sufficient amount of fish that people can be able to eat. And therefore, as scientists, as people who are in the field, what then are the interventions that are needed? Perhaps you already know that Kenya is importing frozen tilapia from China. That is just a stepgap measure, but it's not sufficient because I think the import is something less than 50,000 tons of fish every year. So again, it's not sufficient to bridge the gap. So yes, the academia, the researchers, and government policymakers, private developers and farmers, people are engaging in conversation. How can we intervene to bring back fish on table for everyone? We have research and innovation technologies, things to do with agropark, aquapark, biofloc models. These are emerging models. I will talk about them briefly later on in this presentation. In terms of food distribution models, food safety campaigns, and also infrastructure improvement. So some of these projects are being run by specific institutions. And now I want to talk about the Kenya Climate Smart, a project that we are running together with institutions that you can see there, taking the lead in this project, that is Climate Smart Fish Culture Systems. So how is it climate smart? Because we want to increase productivity, increase net returns, improving efficiency, reducing emissions, and increase resilience, and also looking at gender parity. Of course, Kenya Climate Smart has three triple win objectives of increasing return production, increasing resilience, and also reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So that is a World Bank funded project. And of course, it's also cutting across other value chains, not specifically aquaculture. So right now, we are promoting sustainable smallholder aquaculture productivity through what we call landscape and seascape aquapark models in Busia. And you can see this is just an aggregation of over 100 farmers who have come together, and they are doing ponds together in a consolidated approach to benefit from economies of scale. So they purchase feeds in bulk, so they get commission from suppliers, and in that they are able to minimize expenses and maximize output. It's quite interesting, and the county government of Busia is also very important in this. They are the front leaders in this kind of technology, and they have basically joined this project through their component one, KSAP component one, where they have done fencing. They are also leading in training and other aspects to make it more productive. So we have also embedded some of our technologies in these ponds, including bioflocs, and we are seeing really improved production. I think this also speaks to the volume of increased production while maintaining environmental sanity. Because when the ponds are consolidated this way, and now we are seeing farmers are using these ponds as waste reduction units, because they bring their waste from the kitchen, from wherever, abattoirs, and in those biofloc ponds, they are able to degenerate waste to create more live materials that are actually food for fish. Yes, there are also other technologies like periphyton technology. This was the work of one of my students who I think is also in this meeting. And we did find that indeed periphyton technology is enhancing growth performance and delaying prolific breeding of night tilapia. This is quite interesting because we know that one of the major problems of tilapia is prolific breeding behavior that limits its fast growth. And therefore, if the technology that is just eco-friendly like this can minimize that behavior, then to maximize its production and reduce its culture period, that's really, really quite interesting. The technology basically avails periphyton that are attached to the substrate you are seeing on logs or poles there, and the fish is basically able to graze them and get quality proteins. With this technology, the fish is not able to make nests, and that's why they delay in prolific breeding behavior. And also, the periphyton is quite rich in proteins, and therefore the farmers will only give basic diet, basically low protein diet, which is low cost. So at the end of the day, the farmer will make profit because they will spend less in feeds. Remember, feed accounts for almost 60% of production cost in aquaculture. We are also looking at cages in the lake. This is Bukani. This is Busia, I think Seoport. So remember, the current system of cages is using metals, and these metals rust, and some of these rust material particles mix with the feeds, and the fish can eat those rusts. Through biomagnification, the metals could be accumulating in fish, and therefore could bring problems, not only for fish, but also for people who are eating those fish. So we have a new, we are introducing the high density polyimide cage design, where we are using pipes, high density pipes. And their beauty is that they don't sink, and you don't need to look for other floaters because the pipes themselves are floaters. Quite efficient, 20-meter diameter cage. This already installed in Busia, and this can contain over 100,000 fish. So with the proper care, you can imagine if you're harvesting 100,000 fish, basically 5 or 6, 7 months later, it's more profitable than small cages that farmers have in the lake. So this is the direction, the shift that we are trying to make farmers to follow. Of course, it's not cheap, but we are now seeing farmers making groups in cooperatives and buying these materials to invest in large cage systems. So yes, of course, we cannot rule the fact that we have a lot of fish harvested now. And the other day we went through the lakes. We are seeing quite high production of fish already happening from the cages. Issues of post-harvest technologies, I think that will come later, because that is also another critical aspect that is now bringing worries in terms of fish production. We are also raising finger ponds. Finger pond technology, this is my colleague from Egerton University, Professor Kembo, is leading this. This is just to bring, to reduce also the flood rats at the flooding areas. This is a project, a technology for flooding areas. Remember, when flood comes, it means reeds all over like that, and the finger ponds are put somewhere there. So the farmers are able to get fish which are naturally stocked by the flooding waters when the level rise. And when the level goes down, the fish will get trapped in the finger ponds. And it is just a very extensive way of producing fish, not really a lot, but it's just sufficient for subsistence level at the backyard or the home rural sectors. So we are doing this in Siaya County. We have done the layout, and of course we have constructed also some of them. And in between the ponds, we are putting vegetables and fruits and tomatoes, just to make sure that there's sufficient food for community at their backyard levels. Again, the issue of biofloc technology is also picking up quite strongly. And we have also been able to even talk with our, in the academic circles. Now we have agreed through publications that biofloc technology is a sustainable way of aquaculture, because we feeding fish on bacterial flocks, really saving feed cost by almost 30%, reducing carbon footprints, because bioflocs are efficient carbon sinks, and that's quite interesting. And we are getting, faster fish growth and promoting probiotic bacteria. I think this is also a quite interesting direction, even very good for dryland aquaculture, because the water is not recirculated. We don't remove that water quite oftenly because of the bacterial load that we want to encourage there. We have 6-meter diameter biofloc units that we already constructed in our Maseno fish farm. that can contain around 6,000, about 3,000 to 4,000 fish. And with proper management, of course, we know that bioflux reduces culture period to between 4 to 5 months with proper care, aeration, and the feeding. And of course, that is speaking directly to profitability. Bacterial flocks are up to 63% crude protein, and they make flocks that sometimes are over more than 1 millimeter. This is even more precious than the pellets that we buy commercially. So you can imagine that we don't have to use a lot of feeds when you're using this technology. So that brings the profitability aspect to the farmer and to the community. So we have also found through studies that it improves protein utilization efficiency in tilapia. And that's quite interesting because then that lowers the feed conversion ratio even much lower. And it encourages use of low quality diet, which is cheap in the market. So this is quite interesting. Even in terms of improving survival, we are using biofloc technologies to produce live food materials. We are talking about rotifers, artemia, copepods, and cladocerans to produce, these are live food materials for fish larvae. And why are they important? It's because, you know, a fish larvae, which is barely 3 days old after hatching, does not have a functional stomach or a functional gut. And therefore, if you give it a diet that is inert, is not digestible, then that fish larvae will die. So it is possible we can increase fish survival in hatcheries by using live food materials because we can give them directly to the fish. And remember, we can also use bioencapsulation technologies where we can inject pigments or prophylactics or even essential nutrients we can inject them in the live food material, and then finally we feed it to the fish to achieve the objective that we want. We can also use this technology for sex reversal of fish in our hatcheries. So this is speaking directly to fish survival in hatcheries, because production of fish seed is one of the biggest challenges in aquaculture in Kenya. And this is one way of solving that problem, ensuring that we have sufficient seed and high quality seed for farmers in aquaculture. So yeah, it's also possible to produce those live feed using bio-waste, fish waste, or environmental waste to generate bacteria, which they use as their food, and then you feed the fish with that particular live material. It's quite interesting. And this is one of my friends, I think Robert, you are in the meeting. This is the paper we published recently, how we can use waste-generated bacteria and some selected probiotics to improve live food production. So let me now talk about value addition, so as one of the aspects of improving fish quality and also fish consumption capacity. Remember, some people maybe will not want to eat fish as whole. So this fish can be transformed into other products, fish samosas, skewers or balls or fingers or burger or even chapati, you know, and then this can increase the consumption of fish. Why? Because in that same level, we are then reducing food losses, which is really a big problem, not only in Kenya, but global. Things to do with training and capacity, quite interesting. And also cooking and proper production, cooking of food, fish, so that it can increase the consumption of the fish. So I want to talk about Artemia project. I will finish with the Kenya Climate Smart. Now, this project is happening in Malindi, a village called Kazuhoni. This community are underprivileged because the place is dry and there's no agriculture cannot take place there. So their actual livelihood is the sea, is the water and the salt that they can produce from the salt pans. So Artemia is very interesting. it's an aquatic insect that inhabits saline, hypersaline waters. Artemia is producing cysts. You can see the cysts here on my left, upper left. Cysts, these are gold mines. Artemia cysts, 1 kilo is 6,000, 7,000 Kenya shillings in the Artemia global market. So within Artemia value chain, you can also produce salt. Indeed, salt is quite interesting because Artemia salt ponds with Artemia produce high quality salt, and salt companies in coastal Kenya have already realized this, and they're also planting Artemia in their salt, in their ponds. And therefore, Artemia can also be used to make cake, omelette, and this happening in Vietnam, you know, Artemia soup. So again, speaking directly to human food, increasing consumption of Artemia in different forms. So also Artemia is quite important for as a live feed material to improve laviculture. I'm just going to say that in Kenya, marine aquaculture is dead because there's no proper diet for baby fish, for marine fishes, baby larval fishes. Artemia is the solution there. And therefore, it's quite interesting that Artemia is now being looked at as a viable opportunity for improving mariculture in the coastal Kenya. So we are doing this project together with Tanzania in somewhere called Tanga, and Kenya is in Kazuoni. And this is just our layout of farms where we have also water reservoirs there. We have other brine reservoir. These are our experimental ponds, A3, A1, up to B3. And we also have Artemia biomass production ponds. This is an acre pond. It's very big. So in these ponds, basically, we are harvesting Artemia. If you can see on my right bottom, there's a glass there. I'm holding Artemia in a beaker, so highly concentrated, harvested from one of the ponds. So with that, it's interesting also to mention how did Artemia come to Kenya? It's a long history, but I will summarize it, that Artemia was inoculated in our coastal area by around four decades ago. And this Artemia has evolved to become a permanent colonizer of that area through biological means. So right now we can say we have a permanent population of Artemia in the Kenyan coast. Are we using it? That is the big question. So what we did, first of all, is to determine what is the genetic makeup of this Artemia in Kenya, because Artemia is not native of this country. The ancestors are in San Francisco Bay in the USA. That is where they came from. So we were trying to understand what are the genetic adaptations that have occurred all this time, 4 decades, 40 years, that we now have an established population. Quite interesting results it did. After running this genetic analysis, we have seen that the local Artemia has developed, has acquired extra genes, genetic materials that we suspect heat shock protein gene is one of them, and they have been able to survive in this hot environment. And that is quite interesting because now we have a permanent population of Artemia, which is being used by salt companies to produce salt, and the local people are also using this Artemia in their artisanal salt production ponds. They get salt, which they sell to other people, and they get money. They use this Artemia cysts in aquaculture, even in low condition, and that also gives them a lot of money. Quite raining in Sumu right now. So some of the statistics we have found, maybe I don't need to go into details there because really need scientific information. But then now we are harvesting that Artemia to use it to produce feeds. What we are seeing here is Artemia flakes, harvesting biomass and drying them to form flakes that can be used to make feeds in aquaculture. Some of these Artemia are also being used to culture shrimps. You can see those are some of the field trips that we'd had before to get shrimp from the wild and use Artemia to culture them in laboratories. So we have already identified sites where we have constructed ponds, and now we have an Artemia paradise where we have completed ponds, and we are using these ponds to culture Artemia in mass in coastal Kenya. And even the local dailies have also captured what we are doing, trying to tell the public what is going on. And we are using a new method, which is the biofloc technology, to produce Artemia. Basically, we are just adding molasses into the ponds and also manipulating the carbon-nitrogen ratio. And we are seeing, with, of course, with aeration, large volumes of Artemia can be harvested. So we are also, you see, just hatching from using
Hello, everyone. It looks like we lost Dr. Ogello for a moment. Let's maybe hang back to have him dial back in and use the meantime to think about some interesting questions also that we could ask him toward the end of the lecture. Thanks. And there he is. All right, I lost you for a second.
I lost
Welcome
my
back.
connection.
Thank
Oh,
you.
yeah.
It is raining. It is raining.
It's
Cats and
raining.
dogs here.
It's raining heavily. Yes.
Yeah, and we lost. I think power went off a little bit. So I'm back. I hope you didn't lose me a long time ago.
No, I think we just lost you about a minute ago. Yeah.
Okay, so I will share again. Did you hear me talk about?
I don't think we saw this slide. I think it was the one before, maybe.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll go back.
but-
This one
No, one before.
here.
No.
No.
Hey.
No. Yes.
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 Yes. This one we
Okay.
have. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So what I was saying in this slide, actually we harvesting Artemia biomass and drying that biomass to make feeds for fish. It's quite interesting because Artemia has a lot of protein that can be used to make feeds for fish. Because in the coastal area, it is very difficult to get protein source. So this is a naturally available material that can be used in that regard. So this is my colleague just harvesting, and then this is the dryer, solar dryer. And then what we are seeing here, these are Artemia flakes. And we use them to make feeds. Sometimes we can also use them to feed shrimps directly. When we harvest shrimps from the wild, we use Artemia to feed them, just trying to appreciate really whether Artemia can be a good diet even for shrimps, shrimp culture. So in this slide, I'm showing that our Artemia production site, remember we had to make a new site for production of Artemia using biofloc technology. So after identification of sites, it was about clearing and measuring ponds, and we have to then dig the ponds, and we are using the local community who are the owners of the land, and they are the beneficiaries of the project. And also the ponds that they dig, actually these are their own ponds. So right now we have a completed pond site. Actually, we call it a Artemia paradise because it is fully inoculated with Artemia. And now people are harvesting. The farmers are also harvesting salt. Salt is going as far as Congo, as far as Botswana, Malawi, and all other countries. So, and they get a lot of money out of this. This is sustaining their livelihoods and also making them get economic growth within their specific areas. So yes, sometimes the media also get curious and captures what we are doing just to disseminate information further in terms of the new technology that we are now using. You can see we are putting aerators in some of these ponds. We are using molasses to make sure to increase the carbon content so that Artemia can get a lot of bacteria to eat. Artemia is feeding on bacteria and other algal materials. So with that, we have been able to harvest quite some volumes, which we are using for fish culture and also seeds that farmers are selling directly as to get money. As I mentioned earlier, that 1 kilo of Artemia seeds, dry seeds, is fetching around $60 US dollars, which is quite a substantial amount of money here. So in terms of application of Artemia in local laviculture initiatives, farmers now want Artemia to grow their fish in hatcheries to improve their survival and to make sure they have high quality seeds, which fetch also a lot of money in the market. And Artemia is doing the miracle. Again, Artemia can be used to produce pellets because of high protein nature. Once it is harvested, it can be mixed with other ingredients like wheat bran or cottonseed cake, sunflower, and other premixes, and of course binders. And this can be pelletized artisanally in artisanal feed production communities, which is also very important because most people get their feed from artisanal sector in Kenya. In terms of socioeconomic effects, we are also trying to engage with the community. To what extent are they, benefiting from Artemia culture, and also understanding their needs and feelings. And of course, water is a big problem in this area, as you can see with the results. Quite challenges. Water is coming out strongly. Unreliable markets. Some of them, poor wages. These are, significant challenges there. Land conflicts, quite significant because the salt companies, these are people who have a lot of money and they want to grab land from the local communities, which is bringing a lot of problems in those areas. So just a few problems that are happening there and how they can be solved using some of these technologies. And now let me talk about this project. This is called the Blue Cycling, converting waste to oil, the power of black soldier fly. Quite interesting. I know one of my collaborators in the meeting, Juma from Hydro Lab in Busia. We use his lab as our living laboratory for this test. So basically, BSF is converting waste to proteins, and these proteins is food for fish, for pigs, for other livestock, and with a lot of protein in it. It's quite interesting that this animal can be used to convert waste to food. And remember that the other products include fats and manure, which is very interesting for crop production. So we are just starting this, even in terms of the value chain. Of course, I know that in our living lab in Busia, this involves community, and Juma is working very well there because the BSF produces eggs. These eggs are given to women groups in the community, and they grow them and they bring them back to Hydro Lab, where they are given 100 shillings per kilo of larvae that they have already raised. And we are seeing this really picking up. The county government of Busia is also very receptive because this is a waste reduction strategy, because BSF can convert 30% of bio-waste into biomass, and that is pure protein, which can be used to feed fish and other livestock. And also the byproduct like manure is also very healthy, that can be used in crop production. So just a conceptual framework from bio-waste, moving into byproducts and also to consumption level, which is important for human and also for the animals. And of course, the shamba mix, that's the manure, which is really doing well and good for crop farming. So within the spirit of biocircular economy, I think this is where the direction where people are going. And remember, One Health program, Planetary Health program, as we mop up the waste from the environment, that is cleaning the environment and converting this waste into usable products. So providing food, providing resilience, improving economic well-being of human society, and above all, doing it in an environmental safe way. And finally, I want to prioritize some of these ventures for future aquaculture. Where are we going? What do we need to do? What do we need to prioritize so that we can move towards fish sufficiency for every person, every mouth? For example, in Kenya, how can we move from 5 kilograms per person per year to 10 kilo per person per year? We must remove dependence from natural stocks through domestication and through aquaculture. Aquaculture is the in thing that is going to provide fish. Remember, I showed you earlier, there's no fish in Lake Victoria. It is basically meant for swimming and for transport. We must therefore produce our own fish out of the lake. And in that way, we are also giving the lake time to rejuvenate, to bring back fish through natural processes. We must be able to use improved seed, that is seed production. Remember, live food is a trick to ensure we have proper and cost-effective seed. Species selection, this is genetics. We must do selective breeding also. As we select proper species that can do well in our region, we have to do selective breeding so that we're able to produce genetically vibrant species that can be able to withstand the wrath of changing climate. Microbial management, yes, bacteria runs the world. Periphyton, biofloc, and all sorts of bacterial ventures. Can we be able to bring bacteria to do for us the gmix? Because that is pure protein we are talking about. Single cell protein production is a priority for future aquaculture. We need to better understand the immune system of our fishes. We have to use integrated approaches, the biocircular economy, using the waste to produce materials, to produce food, and to produce wealth, both for plants and for animal farming. Coastal and offshore farms, we are not doing very well in our coast. We have a lot of coastal stretch. Because of technicalities, we are not able to exploit it. And now we have foreigners who are fishing in our waters. So we have also to think about offshore farming in terms of even cages, very, very, very important. And also multi-trophic aquaculture is also a form of integrated aquaculture to target the offshore, to target other species in the marine, because I think in Kenya, freshwater fishes are very famous, but marine species are more nutritious. So those are the things that we still need to appreciate and move towards marine fish production. Full independence from fishery stock, yes, in terms of lipid and protein ingredients. We have to eliminate the use of fish to feed fish. And that's why Artemia is coming in. That's where the biofloc things are coming in. And other protein sources for fish feed production. Quite interesting also. I've talked about integration and societal leverage, quite important. We have to talk together, multi-stakeholder interaction, ecosystem approach to aquaculture production, We have to look at also international cooperation in terms of a win-win basis, bringing the private people, public-private partnership programs must be embraced. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to stop my presentation there because I've come to the end. Thank you so much for listening. And now we can discuss.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ogello. And I hand it over to Anke to moderate the discussion. It was very enjoyable, and I hope that there is a lot that we can discuss. I hope there's going to be lots of responses to this presentation. And there are also some questions to guide the discussion.
Great. Thank you, Louise, and thank you so much, Professor Ogello. So I would encourage everyone, like we always do, to either put a question in the chat or raise your hand. We're quite a few people today, so it's probably easiest if people just use the raise hand icon so we can keep things in order. I'm sure there's a lot of very interesting questions coming out of this talk. So some people had some network issues, so but as always, we always put up and circulate the recording to the group afterwards. So if you had to cut out at certain sections, you can listen to those sections later. So I don't see any hands at this point. Maybe then I just start with a comment. I was very intrigued to hear that the Artemia actually came from the San Francisco Bay 40 years ago. Are we using it for feed here as well? Do you know? Is that how it was brought purposefully to the Kenyan coastal regions, or do you think that was just an accident?
Hey, thank you, Hank. It's not an accident. This was a project between the Belgian and Kenya. It was Kenya-Belgian project somewhere in 1980 something, I think 81 or 82 there. It was not an accidental inoculation. This was purposeful because I think the Belgian, that's Professor Patrick Suglus, the father of Artemia, is the one who inoculated Artemia in the Kenyan coast to improve aquaculture and to improve local aquaculture. In Francisco Bay is one of the major sources of Artemia in the world, and they are producing cysts. This cyst is fetching quite substantial amount of money in the Artemia global market. And I think there's a lot of revenue that comes from that. They supply Vietnam, they supply Asia, and also some farmers in Kenya buy Artemia from San Francisco Bay.
Thank you. Very interesting. I don't know if my other San Francisco colleagues knew that. I certainly did not. We have a question from Rachel who asked if any of your research projects are incorporating health-related outcomes to maybe look at nutrition or something like that.
Thank you for that question. Not directly, but we are approaching health issues from the nutrition direction. Remember the principle of One Health. Nutrition is key, and fish, being the natural superfood, is playing the tricks in terms of nutrition. So you eat fish, you improve your, if you want to live forever on this earth, then just eat fish and exercise.
Thank you. And I think Valentine has her hand out. Do you want to ask your question, and then Joy gets the next question?
Thank you so much, Doc, for a wonderful presentation. My question is, as we do the domestic aquaculture in fish production, we are aiming at reducing the overfishing in the lake. And you've said also there is no fish in Lake Victoria as at now. What policies are there in place that ensure that fishing in the lakes will be controlled? Because as much as we practice the domestic one, then the fishing in the lakes is not controlled. Are there policies in place?
Yes, thank you so much, Valentine. Lake Victoria has been a case study for scientists and for environmentalists. That is quite interesting. Looking at it from the theory of the tragedy of the commons, Lake Victoria is a victim because I think, of course, there are policies, yes, but implementation has been a problem where we have seen a lot of overfishing taking place, and that has radically reduced the fish species. Remember, at one point, Lake Victoria had over 300 fish species. Right now, we are talking about less than 20 species. So a radical reduction of fish species there. We are talking about issues of pollution. And this is a big problem, especially along the riparian towns from Busia, Siaya, Kisumu, going always to Migori. And on the other side, remember, we have Jinja, Uganda. We have Tanzanian towns also along the Lake Victoria. So Lake Victoria is suffering from 3 countries, major pollution sources from 3 countries. So then cannot breathe, they will die.
Okay, Doc, just sorry, in addition, I appreciate the area where you said in Busia, that is Seaport. Actually, this is something I've witnessed. There used to be fish in that area, but as of now, there is low quantity. Even the fishermen come back, sometimes empty nets, and there is a conflict because they try to get into Ugandan waters. So there is conflict. Why are there more in the Ugandan waters and not in the Kenyan waters?
Yes, Valentin, I think you are right. I think it's about management. Remember, in Uganda, the aquatic ecosystems are under military patrol. Yes, and you can imagine how ruthless they are. You have also heard that in many cases, our fishermen who cross the border, they get arrested in Uganda, and they have to be punished for fishing without licenses there. In Kenya, I think we have been a bit lenient, and now we are starting to see the consequences of our lenience to the extent that the fish population has gone really, really down. So again, the issue of pollution, which is also a major culprit, of course, there's minimal treatment system from sewage, from urban runoff and all this, but it is not sufficient, to eliminate all the waste into the lake. Our rivers, coming from Mao and other forested areas, with the agriculture, with the plantation agriculture, tea, sugarcane, the use of fertilizers, all these are swept by waters into the rivers, and they come to Lake Victoria, and also the issue of siltation. In Lake Victoria, around the Winam Gulf, right now, the depth is barely 30 meter average, and at one time it was 80 meters. So you can see we have lost almost half of the depth of the lake. If we continue this way, it will become a swamp. So you can basically walk through from Kisumu to Mbita. You see, and that's really drastic. So losing a half of the depth of the lake means a lot, because we have lost a lot of microhabitats for fish. And that explains why we have problems, because then even the fish breeding areas have also been destroyed. You see, with the silt and people destroying wetlands and mangroves around the lake. Thank you, Valentin.
Thank you. So now the questions are trickling in. So I have Joy next, and then a comment from Jennifer, and then Caleb had their hand up for a minute. So let's start with Joy.
Thank you, Dr. Ogello. I have 2 questions. The first one, from a previous seminar, we understood that although the people working in the fish industry, the fisherfolk and the fishermen, when they do some research, they found that working in that area does not necessarily translate to consumption of fish. So as a group or as an organization or institution, how do you ensure that these people also consume the fish from the industry they work in? And these are also implied that in those areas where we find other people, HIV prevalences are also quite high, and fish being nutritious. Do you have any ideas or projects to ensure that they also consume the fish? And number two, as aquaculture is gaining ground, we still find many people around the lake region are not quite okay with eating fish from the fish ponds. Some complain, from what I've heard, that it smells like mud. I'm not so sure how that is. And also encourage them to eat other species of fish other than the 3 or 4 that we are used to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joy, for the beautiful questions. Let me take the first one. Yes, fish has become so expensive that even fish farmers cannot buy their own fish. I have witnessed that a fish farmer comes from the lake and he has caught maybe 5 pieces of fish. He prefers to sell this fish because he cannot buy this fish himself. So expensive. So he sells this fish and gets money and uses that money to buy sugar. And probably this guy is diabetic. So you can imagine where the problem is cascading. So the issue of consuming fish is because of cost, and they prefer to sell this fish to the industry, especially the Nile perch. People who are trading on Nile perch. You know how lucrative Nile perch is in terms of economics. They get a lot of money from it, and fishermen prefer to sell it. Now, of course, you are talking about sex for fish problem. That's quite eminent in the lake region. And the projects that are coming up to prevent this is, for example, aquaculture, so that everybody can be able to get fish. Why are our young girls selling their body? It's because they want fish from fishermen. If they can be taught how to produce their own fish, they will not go to the beaches. They will be in their homes. And that is working, especially in Busia. For example, the aquapark model. A congregation of over 100 ponds, and all these are owned by women and youth, and they're just there. So every person has their own pond, manage their own pond. They don't have time to go to the beach, because even that beach, there's no fish there. So I think those are some of the projects that are actually being championed to prevent this problem. And of course, the Eat Fish campaign, Eat More Fish campaign, it's periodical. I think it's also, it comes and goes, but now even with the ABDP project, I think there's a component that is also talking about, farming fish for commercial purposes and for business. And I think with that, it also encourages people to eat their own fish. In terms of palatability, yes, people who are experienced, who have been eating fish for some time, can tell you this is wild fish and this is fish from fish pond. Scientifically, yes, the fish from fish pond might have the muddy taste, especially when the management is not proper, because they will always eat fish that have already fallen on the mud. And you can imagine that mud taste can somehow be felt in the flesh. And I think that makes the difference for people who are very experienced, whose tongue are very experienced to differentiate. But nutritionally, the fish is all okay, either from aquaculture or from the wild. They all have the same nutritional components. Thank you, Joy.
Thank you. Yeah, I think Joy's second question also resonated with other students. Jennifer wrote that, we need strategies to change the perceptions of consumers, because a lot of people think that fish from the natural environment are better, but you just explained that nutritionally that is not the case, but yeah, changing the perceptions might need bigger efforts. So let's see, Caleb had his hand up for a minute, but I don't see it anymore. Caleb, do you still have a question? Yeah. Perfect, yes, then you're next.
Thank you, just a small one. Thank you, Dr. Erick, for a wonderful, wonderful presentation. My only concern is the issue of land conflict. Land is a very big issue, such that even the people who are not using land and who are not even interested in aquaculture may not do aquaculture to access those lands. Like wetlands, you will find currently they are owned either by individual or by government. Along the shoreline of Lake Victoria, it is assumed that 100 meters from the lake is for the government, but currently they are individualized. I'm happy that you have traveled wide and abroad and must have met challenges associated with individual ownership of the land. Now, for those who are interested in venturing into aquaculture, like us or any other cooperative society who may want to venture into the aquaculture, how would you advise them to go to proceed, taking note of those challenges associated with the land ownership? They want to make a cage in the water. There are those people living along the coast, the shoreline. How do you negotiate? How do you negotiate or overcome those challenges associated with the ownership of the land within the wetland or within the lake, the water mass, the lake regions? Thank you.
Thank you, Caleb. Yes, your question is valid indeed. It reminds me, there was a time I was doing some work for MasterCard Foundation for Blue Economy study. And when I went around, the youth were telling me they don't have land, so they cannot do aquaculture. And that was the biggest challenge actually mentioned. Land ownership, because culturally land belongs to the father. And even women don't have access to land in the Kenyan context. And these are the challenges. So yes, I think one thing, Caleb, to answer you is we need a mind shift to move to technologies that either require very little space of land or in a model where people can, agree and come together and do aquaculture as a community, you see? So this community farming or community-based aquaculture can be negotiated even in government lands, like riparian areas, those are government lands. Areas near some wetlands, those are government lands. So they can be negotiated with the government as long as it is done sustainably. Then perhaps the issue of land can be minimized, because as population grows, Caleb, I can tell you it's going to be worse in the next 2-3 decades, because land fragmentation is going to be very, very intense. So if we still want to talk about pond-based aquaculture 10, 20, 30 years to come, then I think we will not be able to produce sufficient quantity. So we need to embrace technology that can help us produce fish in small segments of land. Thank you, Caleb.
Thank you, satisfied.
All right. We have many more comments and questions, so let me try to organize them a little bit. Frederick had a comment that we touched on earlier, the importance of cross-border collaboration and agreements, because the fish might grow in one area of Lake Victoria and then cross over into the territories of a neighboring country, and that could be a problem here if one country amps up efforts and the other one kind of like sees more of the benefits. But I have a very specific question from Anne about biofloc feeds. If they can also be substituted with plants like azolla, and if you need to dry the azolla, or if to have a commercial feed, or if you could just give it in its raw form. Maybe we'll take that next.
Yes, thank you so much. That question is nice. I think we have run a lot of experiments using azolla and all that, and other aquatic macrophytes and microphytes as fish feed materials. The problem we have with azolla is the roughages is very high, and the fish cannot be able to digest that. So to process it into usable form, you probably spend some time and money to make the nutrients available for the fish. So it is true that it is a potential source because it has good protein, but then the problem is those roughages. The ash content is just too high, so it has to be reduced to some extent, and that might be expensive as well. So I don't think it has not gone to commercial level. It is still at artisanal and mainly at experimental level.
Thank you. We had another comment from Frederick that sand harvesting can also affect the fish breeding in the Kenyan waters. I don't know if there's something you want to comment to that. Have you run across that problem?
Yeah, that's true, Hanke. That's true. Indeed, in Busia, some parts of Busia, I think sand harvesting is a booming business. So much so that you find boats coming from the lake and they are all loaded with sand instead of fish. So it is true because as they disturb the bottom, the fish is running away. They are destroying homes of fish and destroying microhabitats. So it's possible that can be a direct consequence to fish production. Yes, indeed, that's true. But then we have to think again in terms of how then do we limit that sand, make it not reach the lake, and this is through ecosystem approach to lake management. We have to stop cutting trees along the riparian, the catchment areas, so that the trees can arrest those siltation.
Great. We have an interesting question from Catherine asking if there are ethical issues around the projects that you've been involved with so far to see, in terms of the technological and innovations, are there any concerns in that direction?
Well, so far we have not had issues with ethical, concerns. I know government projects, for example, Kenya Climate Smart, we are running it, and it's a government-funded project. Of course, our national science, NACOSTI is also involved at some level. These are the bodies that regulate the ethical issues with the government-funded projects. So yes, indeed, before they are rolled out, you have to get some approval from these bodies. Yeah, and of course, the community are also made aware that yes, these are the terms of references that how we are going to work. This is what you are going to do, and this is what the project will do. So it's quite obvious for every stakeholder.
Yeah, which is a nice segue into our next question. And Valentine asked if there are any government support that you receive for any of your projects.
Yes, indeed, because some of these projects are coming through the government, like Aquaculture Business Development Project is funded by World Bank and also the government of Kenya. Kenya Climate Smart is funded by World Bank and government of Kenya. This is sharing. I think it is some sharing pattern. We also have funds from external donors. I mean, just like WIOMSA, this is Western Indian Ocean Marine Association that is funding my project at the coastal Kenya. Yeah, and also we have Horizon 2020. I think that's based in the US. It is funding the blue cycling project. So it's quite a mix of funders. Yes, and the government is also playing a big role in this. That's true.
Great. I have one more question from Joy. If there are any of the projects that are also involving water hyacinths in Lake Victoria?
Now we are not working directly with water hyacinth in Lake Victoria, and not any of our projects we are running currently is handling that, Joy. But I know that there has been a lot of conversation about regulating the water hyacinth physical harvesting. That has been a long time conversation. But of course, if you ask me, reducing pollution, organic loads into the lake is one sure source of solving this problem.
Thank you. I'm looking if there are any more questions. This is your last chance. We have like 8 minutes left to put a question in the chat or put your hand up. I have one question. You talked earlier about selective breeding and also talked about, when you talked about Artemia, how there was genetic modification happening naturally over the last 40 years. Are there any efforts either in Kenya or maybe in other parts of the world to move aquaculture forward by support selective breeding, maybe with genetic modification to select fish that are resilient and nutritious, and are there any efforts like that underway?
Thank you, Anki, again. We have our national freshwater aquaculture reference center is in Sagana. Sagana is in central Kenya. It is the biggest government farm, fish farm. And that's where we are doing a lot of selective breeding because the space is there, capacity is there, and of course, being a government institution, so it makes it easier to roll out the selective breeding program. Right now, together with Kenya Marine and Fisheries Research Institute, we are at generation 8 for tilapia and generation 3 for catfish. These are fishes that have undergone selective breeding with time, and then this particular fish is being distributed to other hatcheries. Remember, Sagana is the national nuclear for seed production. So then these broodstock are being taken to other counties as centers where farmers can reach them with ease. And this is a government project that is financed by government, and sometimes it's not in sufficient quantities. So not every farmer is able to access this broodstock. In terms of genetic modification, we are not there yet, Anke, but we're just using the morphological sites or characters to select the fish, and we are seeing good results, which is just sufficient for our production. So we are not manipulating any genetic material for the fish, yes. And the Kenyan laws still don't allow genetically modified organisms. So that is not possible to happen.
And it sounds like if selective breeding is successful enough, as you described with the 8 generations of tilapia already, maybe that is what it takes right now to identify good seeds. Great. I have one question coming in from Jacqueline. Any efforts to educate local fish farmers around Lake Victoria on these interesting technologies in fish feed production?
Yes, I think I lost you for a second, but I got the question, Anke.
Oh, good. Great.
Yes, of course. Community engagement is normally part and parcel of every project. They're the biggest stakeholders in all this. So we occasionally have, training sessions, and ABDP, that's Aquaculture Business Development Project, is really fronting capacity building of our farmers and our fishermen to an extent that, we are now trying to encourage fishermen to move to aquaculture. And if they cannot do land aquaculture, they can do cages. And I can tell you in Busia, in Usenge, in Migori, sustainability. I mean, the carrying capacity of the lake, scientists, that's our job to do. Advising people, where do you place your cage? How do you feed? How do you manage so that we don't really interfere with even other lake users like transport, you see? So some of them are also being encouraged to form groups and farm in
I think you, oh. Sorry, we lost you for a minute, but please continue.
Okay.
Yeah, there you, yeah.
Yes, sorry. I was saying, yes, community engagement is part and parcel of our engagement project. So we engage very closely with communities. Training is part of it. Every project has a training component. To encourage fishermen to even abandon fishing and go to embrace aquaculture, because that is the sure way of getting fish, sufficient fish for them. And also that is ecologically, that is important for fish to rejuvenate and to get time to spawn and to multiply. So indeed, we are actually very close with the communities. That's true.
Great. Thank you. There's one more comment from Valentin. Also, we talked about this earlier about how important this is, that the perception of these new technologies in the community are integrated in strategies, because otherwise the notion of Chinese fish production producing plastic fish, we had comments to that effect earlier. So it seems like many of our students are really finding it important that community education on those new technologies is an integral part moving forward. Great. Thank you so much. I can tell you, Eric, I don't remember that we had that many questions in a session in a long time. So you definitely piqued some interest here. If you permit us, we would love to share your slides as well. We always also put up the recorded session in our internal listserv. Any last comments from Louise or Sherry or Elizabeth for Dr. Ogello?
I just wanted to thank you so much, Dr. Ogello. That was really excellent. And thank you all for participating in such a lively and interesting discussion. So we greatly appreciate your expertise and time. And I'm sure our students will be very interested in staying in touch going forward.
Thank you. You're welcome, Sherry.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining today. I know it's the end of a long day in Kenya, so please enjoy your evening, and we see you all in 2 weeks for our next seminar. Thank you again, Professor Ogello. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.